Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about law enforcement, crime, and punishment in the Elizabethan era.
Alright, so the four topics we're going to talk about are watchmen and constables, punishments and torture, laws in the Elizabethan era, and the death penalties.
Watchmen and constables were the policemen of the Elizabethan era. They were not paid until the 1730s. Local Improvement Acts came in effect. They made towns hold provisions to pay them. Local men were expected to volunteer for the duty before that time.
Watchmen are mostly out during nighttime. Some watchmen have dogs. Constables are mostly out during daytime, and constables usually have horses. The reason for that is because they do more long-distance traveling than watchmen.
In the 15th century, law enforcement and policing was left entirely to local initiative. There was no nationally organized police force from the government or anything. They were organized by local communities, like town authorities and the Queen herself.
Evolution of watchmen and constables.
In 1252, a royal writ established the watch and a ward with royal officers. By order of the King of England, the Winchester Act mandating the watch. From that time until 1730, things stayed a lot the same, but more and more were being appointed during that time. In the 1730s, Local Improvement Acts came in effect, like I mentioned earlier. They made towns hold provisions to pay them. In 1737, an Act of Parliament was passed for better regulating the night watch of the city in London, which specified the number of paid watchmen that should be on duty each night. Between 1754 and 1780, an English magistrate called John Fielding reorganized some buildings like police stations with a team of paid constables and efficient ones too. They were there the first professional policemen in England known as peelers or bobbies. They were set up in London in 1829 by Robert Peel, former Prime Minister in the UK.
So now we're going to talk about the punishments. Just like parents punish their kids, local authorities punish criminals. Though they are not death sentences, some of the punishments we will mention range from severe to mild. So now we're going to talk about the four main punishments. The four main punishments are whipping, cutting limbs off, jail, and the drunkard's cloak.
Whipping is when they tie you up to a wooden stake, just like this, and they whap your... Fuck, I said a whap. Oh my God.
So now we're going to talk about the four main punishments, such as whipping, cutting limbs off, jail, and the drunkard's cloak.
Whipping is pretty self-explanatory, but they tie you up to a wooden stake and they whip your back. That's why people back then often had scars on their back. Cutting limbs off is also pretty self-explanatory, but basically they just cut off often your tongue or your teeth or even fingers. Next up is jail. Organized prisons only appeared in England in 1816, but they had cells to put you in and sometimes even left you to starve. The drunkard's cloak is only when you are accused of being drunk in public. It's a very unique form of punishment, but basically they put you inside a barrel that have holes for your hands and legs so you can walk, but they make you walk around the city. It was very humiliating for many reasons, but it was also very difficult to walk correctly, and if you fell down, well, let's just say you were stuck for a while.
So now we're going to talk about the death penalties.
The first death penalty is beheading. So basically, they put your head into a guillotine, which is the machine shown here, but it has a blade that cuts your head off. And a fun fact about this is that people actually used to fight for whoever went first, because it was when the blade was sharpest, so it would be a clean cut. Because sometimes, if you were going last, it wouldn't be a clean cut, and it would be a painful death. The next one is getting hung, strung, and quartered. For this death penalty, it's basically just you get hanged, and then you get like tied up, and then they cut you into 4 pieces. Next one is burning on the stake. This one is pretty simple, but basically they just put you on a stake and then they burn you alive. The next one is getting crushed. So they put a wooden board over top of you, and then they put a lot of weights on you, and it kills you.
Okay, boiling to death is when you're inside a big pot filled with boiling water and it slowly kills you. Impalement is pretty simple. It's when they impale something sharp inside you or through you. Hanging is when they tie a rope around your neck and they make you stand over a trapdoor. Then the trapdoor opens and automatically breaks your neck. This was the most merciful way of execution. So this is a demonstration of the wheel. So they tied you up to the wheel and then the wheel rotated over the fire, which slowly killed you.
After they did this, they put you on another wheel and they hit you with an iron hammer and broke your bones.
Sawing is when they tie your feet up and they just cut you in half. Back in Elizabethan era, they had some really weird laws, like when we mentioned in class that it was illegal to suspiciously hold salmon in public. The reason for this was actually fairly simple. It was just that if you're seen suspiciously holding a salmon, people assume you've gotten it from illegal channels, as salmons was often illegally fished. The law is still intact to this day.
Here are some other laws back in the Elizabethan era. So, back then, people blamed unexplainable things, like the bubonic plague, or unexplained deaths, or unpleasant illnesses, as the work of witches. This is the reason that witchcraft was illegal and banned, even though it didn't exist. The punishment for this was being burned on the stake. Another weird law is that alchemy was also banned. Alchemists' goals were to turn lead and other metals into gold. Doing this would hurt the rulers of many countries because they had lost the gold, and it was considered the purest substance in the world back then. So they just completely banned it. Alchemy back then was like cooking drugs illegally these days. The punishment for this was hanging or being hung, strung, and quartered.
Thank you for listening to us.